Hi, I'm Beth, I'm 22 and I'm a dancer. I've always loved performing and that's something I've enjoyed doing since I was very young. I started to do ballet class, tap and jazz when I was quite young, and the show was always my favourite part of the year. When I was about 14 I got into contemporary dance and hip-hop styles of dance. Being part of different youth companies and working with different choreographers and taking performance to different performance platforms and theatres around the UK was so exciting, and that definitely fueled my passion for performing now. I love all aspects of the arts generally. I love music, I really enjoy fitness and being active, and I love how dance combines both of those. When I'm not dancing, I really enjoy reading, writing and learning Spanish.
The idea of problematic props came to me in 2018. I was encouraged to look within myself, see what practices that I already engage in, to then teach a workshop.
The golden one thing related to props for me is about staying with your prop. There's times that you feel you can't handle the prop or that the prop's not giving you enough exciting options, but you come back to it, you clear your head and you start unlocking the things that you were not seeing before.
It's really just allowing it some time, having that patience and not trying so much to impose your ideas on how it should move.
I thought, okay, yeah, I'll give it a go, and it was just meant to be a one-time thing, but now it has turned into a very, very big part of Instigate Unknown. I had something small and now it's grown. Hopefully it will continue to grow. It just starts from one little seed, and that little seed turned out to be gold, I think.
And I think Beth really gets that process because she's been able to do like full-on short choreographies. Really, really cool.
Beth has really dedicated her training to discovering problematic props, to kind of analysing where she feels like she can take the method, which is amazing to have someone new work on something and take complete ownership of kind of digging deeper to find where the greatness in it lies.
My topic is the golden one thing with problematic props. The golden one thing to me means really making the best of a situation and really exploring an idea to its full potential. The golden one thing was a training practice which Cherilyn introduced into one of our Zoom sessions. The idea was that we all kind of collectively drilled a movement which we came up with, and then we took turns to do improvisation rounds based on that movement. And I found this so effective and so useful in helping a whole kind of improvised solo just flourish, because there was that starting point and something that you kind of drilled into your body and let it kind of manifest into a whole new thing. So as a training technique for improvisation and exploring movement, it's been really useful. But the golden one thing is also really relevant when it comes to prop work. Problematic props is the practice that Instigate Unknown use. It's a really central focus to the work that Instigate Unknown do. And props are very new to me personally. I haven't got much experience working with props or using props in choreography and for performance. So this whole training process has been completely new. Each week we were sent a creative task for each week of lockdown up until week 10, and from this I really learned that there is so much gold in one particular task or one particular prop, because you can explore it for a full week and share your findings at the end of the week, and you can still work on it after that. There was so much to make from just one stimulus. Week 1's task was putting on a jacket in a parallel universe. I found this task really fun to do. It was quite difficult, especially as it was kind of the first time I was working on a prop. I found it really hard because every time I found a movement that I quite liked, or an interesting way to put the jacket on or take it off, or kind of use it in movement, I couldn't replicate it, and it took me a lot of practice to really get it the same every time. But in a way, this was really good because every time I did the choreography and it changed, I found a new idea, so it just kept evolving and kept growing, and I got much more out of it than I would have if it was just set from the start. It was definitely a challenge, and it was a learning curve for sure. I remember how everyone had done their task very differently. My choreography was quite chaotic. It was week 1 of lockdown. I had much more energy than I did, like 20 weeks later, so I had so much to put into this solo, and that's why it was quite difficult to replicate. And I remember how everyone had such like a cool approach to theirs. Like Cherilyn's was very smooth and controlled. Kyra's was really quite pedestrian but really effective, and Clea's was quite performative, I remember, and she had a whole character with her jacket. And I just loved seeing how everyone was so unique and such a reflection of their style. So week 2 we worked on a practice called With or Without You. So the idea is that you can create a piece of choreography and do it without a prop, and then when you come to do it again, throw an object in there and it still works with the prop. We shared our choreography without the prop and guessed each other's prop, and this was much harder than I anticipated to work out what everyone was using. But then when we figured it out, I loved seeing how everyone really incorporated that object into their movement. I definitely learned a lot from the process of trying different objects out with different creative tasks. I wanted to use an object which I could take a bit more control with. So I used chopsticks, and I held onto them the whole time and used them as an extension of my arms to create quite an arm-focused piece of choreography. In hindsight, this was definitely playing it safe. It was kind of one extreme to the other. So using a jacket and really throwing it about is very different to holding onto the object the whole time and setting choreography that can be replicated. I really learned that as much as I enjoyed doing that piece, I wasn't taking a risk and I was playing it safe. So it's finding the in-between and just trusting that a prop can do what you want it to do. And if it doesn't, just adapting to that on the spot. That's what makes it so interesting. After 10 weeks of lockdown and 10 different creative tasks, we then started to revisit the tasks that we had done. I went back and revisited the photo booth task, which was initially a task set to create still images with different objects in a position in your household. I picked one of the images that I liked the most and then used that as a stimulus to start moving. Another task that was really good to revisit was anti-bowling, which was setting up plastic bottles in the space and then using that space to dance without knocking the bottles over. It was really good to adapt to a space and make do with what you have. It kind of made you appreciate having a bigger space because you were so limited and it was so restricted. But in a way, it wasn't limiting because it made you think of other ways to use the space. I put more bottles in the space and I made it a floor work phrase, create a completely new movement, and it had a much different feel to it. I think revisiting the problematic props task is a really great thing to do. Taking a step back, having feedback, watching each other's work and then going back to it gives you a whole new focus on it and angle, and you can create something completely different the second time around. And it just shows how you don't need tons of different ideas and tons of different stimulus if you just really explore and exhaust one idea. There have been lots of pros and cons of working with props at home during lockdown. I've found that as I've never really worked with props before, doing it in lockdown when I have an abundance of household objects around me and interesting spaces has been much more beneficial because I've had time to really explore it. Whereas if I had been using studio time to explore a new concept, it might have been less productive because there's not always the objects in a studio. So when you're in your house, you can see so many different things and think, how can I use that for the complete opposite purpose that it was meant for? Lockdown has probably been the perfect time to start using props for the first time, but the cons have been being on your own and being in a space that's not really meant for dance. There were times when I used certain props. For example, in week 10 I used a net. There's so much potential in an object like that it's probably going to work better with more dancers in the space and a bigger space. So moments like that made me realise that this isn't an ideal situation. To conclude, I've learned so much from using props during lockdown and completing all these creative tasks and revisiting them. I've really learned that there is so much potential in one idea, there's so much gold in one idea, and that's something I'm going to continue to use in my training, even when training from home, is that you can just have one idea or one object or one creative stimulus and you can create so much from that. You really don't need to have tons of space and the perfect setting. You can always be working, you can always be creating. I've just learned to make the best of a situation, which is what I think everyone's had to do in lockdown. My favourite moment of training in lockdown has been getting to see everybody's approach to the creative tasks. We would share them at the end of the week, so every Sunday we had videos sent to each other and gave each other feedback and encouragement, and it was so motivating and inspiring to see everyone's work. Maintaining that connection as dancers and as creatives was so important during this time in isolation, and getting to meet up on Zoom every week and have rehearsals. We were learning choreography, we were doing improvisation tasks, and if it hadn't have been for the group and that checking time every week, it would have been very hard to keep myself motivated and inspired if it was just completely on my own. This has been Beth Stoddart talking about the golden one thing with problematic props.